Hello and welcome to the Albion Obsessed podcast. You join us on the back of a draw against European chasing Newcastle, two teams chasing Europe. It was bound to be a tense affair, especially as we edge ever closer to the end of the season. But before we dive into our match analysis, let's see who we've got on the show this evening. We welcome Joe. Joe, my friend, how are you?
Hello, Tom. I am doing very well, thank you. It's very nice to finally hand the podcast captaincy armband back over to you, good to see both of your faces.
Oh, thank you very much, Joe. I think you've done an absolutely sterling job as host over the recent weeks. Apologies for my absence. There's been a lot going on in the Budgeon household, which I won't bore you all with the details, but yeah, lots going down at the minute. We also welcome our stateside correspondent, Dagan. Dagan, how are you, my friend? It's been a while.
It has too long. It's good to be back. Thanks for having me as always. It's an exciting time. 3 match weeks left and all to play for. Hard to be upset about that. Tom, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, man, I'm not too bad. Little bit about me and my life. We're moving, we're relocating, so we've sort of been in the depths of looking at houses, talking about mortgages, all that fun adult stuff, which has sort of kept me away from the microphone, as it were. Now, listeners, here's a bit of context for you. Me and Dagan, we've had a rough couple of months, haven't we, Dagan? We've been at loggerheads at times this season, but I think a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight, Dagan, we are going to agree with, and I'm really glad that we've got video evidence of that. But it is worth saying that whilst me and Dagan have disagreed at times this year, it has always been done in a respectful, polite manner, but we both stick to our guns, as all robust decisions should go that way. I'm going to come to you first on this one, Dagan, because you raised this point on the group chat, and I hadn't even realised it. And that was just before a ball was even kicked yesterday. The bench. It was really nice to see Joel Veltman, Igor, Tarek Lamptey, Adam Webster back and on the bench, and as well as Jason Steele. But we had no attacking sort of depth on our bench due to injuries and suspensions. Tad worrying coming into the run-in a little bit, especially sort of like we have at times over recent weeks sort of struggled to find our way in an attacking sense. What did you make of the starting 11? What did you make of the subs? And are you concerned with the lack of depth moving forward into the final bit?
I'm not especially concerned. It sounds like Jorginho could make an appearance at some point. João Pedro will be back after his suspension. He's got one more game out. And it seemed like Mitoma and Sali were short-term rather than long-term types of injuries. So not especially concerned in the long view, but a little concerned, in the short term and with the starting lineup. You don't see Mitoma on the team sheet and you worry a little. And, I think we were fairly one-sided in attack throughout the game as a result of that. I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. But I also think that's where we had an advantage. But I would venture we would have liked the Trippier versus Mitoma matchup at least as much as Minta's Livramento / Burn matchup on the other side. But yeah, I think we've got plenty of attacking talent. And I thought, sometimes it looks like we run out of ideas. Talking to my Newcastle fan friend this morning, he said that's how he felt about them the entire game, and felt like we looked even, scarier than they did with our chances. So I think perspective is so much, right? Because I think we would say the opposite, that Newcastle was scarier and we were afraid of their chances and what they would do counterattacking. But he felt, they were sort of a quagmire. So for what it's worth.
I think that's a really interesting point. And a lot of what I've seen from Newcastle fans, Dagan, says exactly that. They've pretty much saying exactly what we're saying. So I suppose it's no wonder really that it ended in a stalemate. Joe, we saw Mats Vifer filling in as fourth choice centre back again. And Jack Hinchelwood returning to the side in the centre of the park, which was quite a nice one. But also we saw young Harry Howell make the bench, a cousin of Jack Hinchelwood. So again, we're showing our versatility on the field and also that we're willing to give potential opportunities to youngsters.
Yeah, and that's always the club's ethos, isn't it? That we have such a good academy, and we're now 12 years deep into having this academy. I think it's 12, no, 11 years deep into having this academy. And something that Tony Bloom and Paul Barber said when we opened that academy was that it was going to take a good 10-ish years to see the fruit of said academy. And I think we've seen it early, obviously with Jack Hinshaw coming through and a lot of other youngsters coming through before that. And it's going to be great to see if Hal can break through and have a good pre-season and be in and around the first team next season as well. I would like to see him given his Premier League debut by the end of this season, just like a brief cameo like what Jack Hinshaw would had. I think it would be a big step in his career. So, great to see him on the bench. And I think like most other local people, I'm just itching for another local lad to come through and someone else that we can celebrate.
100%. And Dagan, just before we sort of dive into Matt's analysis, just a quick word on Matt's Vifer. I think that he'd probably be the first to admit that he would like to have been involved a lot more than he has so far this season. It seemed when we signed him, he'd sort of come in and he'd be this sort of one-man pivot that sort of we expected from Hürzeler. He's found his chances limited, but he, again, shows his versatility filling in a role that we've sort of been crying out for as of late due to injuries. What did you make of Matt's performance in general over the last couple of weeks?
I mean, I think he's put some of the most promising balls in the box that we've seen, maybe apart from Gruda's delivery to Gomez yesterday. But no, I think he's looked good. He's, seems pretty aware, doesn't seem to get caught out too much, but he manages to get forward. So you have to like both of those things. I think he is a versatile and talented footballer, period. I think it's taken some time to adjust perhaps to the speed of the Premier League. And I think in midfield is the spot where that I think is the most apparent because it's so reactionary. You've got to sort of, be ready to move instantly. And that just being a fraction late can be the difference between winning the ball and getting a card. Playing it right back, you have to anticipate certainly, but I feel like you're in the position the manager wants you to be in, and either playing more of an attacking or playing more defensively. And then you've just got to, play the man that's coming down your flank rather than trying to, we don't do a lot of man marking. So that sort of zonal coverage where you've got to find the space and read and get there quickly enough, I think it's a tougher adaptation. So I really like Weaver. I think he's going to continue to be a player that is a contributor for us. Whether he's a nailed-on starter forever, that remains to be seen, right? But if Baleba moves on, or another player moves, perhaps that position becomes open. But he's not Baleba, right? Like we know that.
Yeah, it's just a quick word on Baleba. I really hope he doesn't win Player of the Season, because we all know what happens to the players that win that coveted award. Just before we go any further, just a reminder, guys, we are live, so please do drop us your thoughts and your comments throughout into the comment section. We will, of course, dive into some questions later on in the show, but if you've got any comments or any thoughts about what we're talking about in the moment, please do drop them in, because that's what we're here for at the end of the day. Joe, you were at the game. Early impetus, certainly from sort of like the armchair fan perspective as myself, was that Newcastle probably had the better opening sort of 10 minutes or so, certainly dominated most of the ball. After a few minutes, they'd sort of, capitalized on a few moments out wide. In the stadium, was there a feeling that that we needed to get a bit more of a grip on the game earlier on, or were you just sort of happy to ride that initial wave?
No, I think you expect Newcastle to come out and be on the front foot. They're a really good team, and they've won the Carabao Cup for a reason, and they're fighting for Champions League for a reason as well. So you very much expect them to come out and maybe put a little bit more about themselves. They've had a few disappointing results of late. The one against Villa springs to mind big time. They were shocking against Villa. So I was sort of hoping that we could ride that early wave, and obviously which we did, and then we capitalized on their missed chances, and then from there I just felt like they were just another team that we were playing and that we could find our way to hopefully get 3 points against them. They didn't pose incredible threats. I thought Isak was pretty anonymous in the first half, to be honest, and they weren't creating anything. So I thought, like, yeah, I think we could possibly have their number again. Obviously, it wasn't to be, but it was just another game against a really good team. And I don't know. I just kept thinking of Hertzler just saying, challenge the establishment. And that's what we were doing, is we were fighting against a team that have a lot of money and a lot of wages spent on them and going toe to toe with them. So yeah, it was all right.
Yeah, I mean, opening 15 minutes, I think they had 7 touches in our penalty area. We had just the one in theirs. But as you say, they didn't really offer much of a threat. I thought that sort of continued from the majority of the game. Of course, we'll talk about the context of how they eventually scored a bit later. But sort of a prelude to that, Dagan, was the stall that was set out early by Craig Pawson. I think it was about 15, 16 minutes in. MINTEH gets the ball away from Dan Burn. Burn lunges right through the back of him, wipes him out entirely, and escapes any form of booking or punishment. Early indications, Dagan, that the referee was probably not going to give us much rub of the green, as they say.
Foreshadowing indeed, Tom. Foreshadowing indeed. I was livid at that moment, and I've been talking in the chat, like, those kinds of decisions that, again, an unbiased casual observer would probably just view as, oh, well, nothing. It changes the shape of the game, because Big Dan Burn on a yellow card 15 minutes in is a different player who has to make different decisions over the course of the match, right? Or potentially has to be taken off. So that non-call alone was enough to change the complexion of the game in what was an obvious and clear yellow card. 99.9% of the time, except this percentage. But you're right. I think it showed where Pawson was from the start. It makes you ask questions about all kinds of things that, I'm not going to espouse conspiracy theories on my first day back, but it's frustrating. And it started and planted the seed of frustration and question about the referee's intentions, integrity, and if not that, quality, right? And again, we know the Premier League officials, and we like to chalk it up to them being bad, but sometimes when the big clubs benefit, when the big money teams with backing are on the edge of Champions League or some other competition, and things just go their way. They just go their way. It's amazing how that works out. So yeah, it was abysmal from that moment, and it got worse as we saw.
Joe, cast your mind back to, I want to say 2016. Baram Kayal, do you remember him? Our Israeli men got stamped on even by one Joey Barton. Do you know who the referee was that day?
I would say Craig Pawson.
I believe it was.
Yeah. That is some next level pettiness from you, that you know that.
I'm a petty man. I am a petty man now. I will save my real spiel and anger for one Mr. Craig Pawson for a bit later. But first of all, I do want to talk about YANKUBA MINTEH. Joe, I thought I was not critical of him in the first 50 minutes, but I thought he could have done a bit more, maybe challenged Dan Burn a bit or put him under a bit more pressure. Because as Dagan says, a Dan Burn on a yellow card with Livramento, who's basically just gone up the other end of the pitch, is a different kettle of fish. Because with Livramento up the other end, MINTEH, when he's got the ball at his feet, has the opportunity to attack. Now, I wanted to see MINTEH a bit wider, a bit further forward to really sort of put pressure on Dan Burn. But he made me eat my words as he struck goal dust on about the half-hour mark, punishing his former club. Really nice effort. I thought at first, he's taken one too many touches. But no, it was a lovely bit of skill as he dances back inside two Newcastle players before firing in. for his 6th goal in the Premier League this season. I think that means he's also the only player under 21 to have more than 10 goal involvements. So that in and of itself is quite impressive. But no, tell us about the goal, Joe, and the celebrations afterwards.
Yeah, weird. But yeah, it was a really good goal, and I think the main thing for YANKUBA is to get consistent minutes, and just get that consistency levels in his performance, and he could be an absolute world beater because he's got all the pace, all the ability when he wants to. Obviously, there's been moments this season where a ball's like sort of slipped under his foot as he's gone to pull the trigger and stuff like that. So it's just about keep going and just learning from your mistakes, and I think he's going to be a very dangerous player for us next season. Definitely, he's adapting to the Premier League really well, and it's causing a lot of teams a lot of problems. So he's definitely been worth the money in my opinion. And yeah, to do that celebration in front of the Newcastle fans, it was weird because he obviously starts it really respectful and like praying to them and like saying you guys on, you know, a lot of respect there. And then I don't know whether he like sees something in the crowd where someone's like giving him a wanker sign or 2 middle fingers, and he's gone, actually, fuck you, I'm playing for these guys. Yeah, it was a strange turn of events, and yeah, good for him to prove why they shouldn't have sold him. But Eddie Howe's obviously backed up and said, you know, we didn't want to sell him, but we had to. So yeah, lucky for us, I guess. We've got a very, very good player.
You can't teach what he has in him. The guy, he does not stop. His tracking back has improved monumentally, and it was stunning the effort that he was able to give late in the game after having made so many runs. You know, you read the stats about, you know, the number of runs that you have like that in the correlation with injury, and you certainly worry when you see a guy just going, you know, 100 miles an hour for as many times as he does. But yeah, he seems to have boundless energy, and yeah, glad he's with us and not them. And
there was also a moment in the second half where he got hit quite bad, and I thought he was going to come off injured, and I was like, that is just our luck. Scores a goal, and then now he's got to go off. But yeah, luckily he played. Did he play the rest of the game? No, I can't remember.
Yeah, he did, because Lamptey came on for Dingra, and then they swapped sides because they went from, because that's one of my criticisms of, well, not criticism, but one of my sort of observations was just the way that we played in the first half. We were very narrow with the Dingra and MINTEH coming quite tightly in, and I thought that wasn't the right thing to do because it was quite a compact centre area of the pitch. I wanted them wider, so I was quite happy to see, you know, the players swap wings in the second half.
I'll just say one thing about his defending. Michael's just said his defending has been amazing, and Dagan mentioned it earlier as well. The amount of times he's done an overhead kick clearance this season is just amazing.
It's very impressive. Now, Dagan, just before we move on from the goal, just a quick word on Mats Pfeiffer. I can never remember how to pronounce it. It's simple stuff that keeps the ball ticking, and he does that very well. 4th assist of the season. What did you make of the goal, and also just a quick word on Mats's assist?
I mean, no, I think he reads well when to make one dire exception. Obviously, that fateful 4-on-1 versus Wolves, but most of the time he makes the right read of what kind of pass to play, the simple one versus the sort of creative, soft, lofted pass. I thought it was a well-chosen ball. MINTEH, which I think frustrates people, his like hesitation to get a better look. But this is an example of when it works, and he finds the back of the net. So it's like, you can't hate that he does that and sometimes is dispossessed, and then love it when it works and he scores. And I find so often the critique that comes for players and managers is like, they'll cheer it when it's successful, but when it's not, it's, you know, this guy sucks. What's he doing? Why is he even out there? And that just it boggles my mind, because it's like, my understanding of the sport, and again, I'm a newer fan, it's just one moment of brilliance, one moment of class that can be the difference between, a result and not. And so to me, you want as many guys who are capable of giving you that moment on the pitch as possible. And even though he will make mistakes, he's a guy who's going to hustle back, right, if he loses possession. And if he gets time on the ball, he can make defenders look really, really silly and come up with, with an outstanding goal like he did. So thrilled with all parties.
Good.
And it's great to see our new players really. I feel like as the season's worn on, our new players are starting to pay dividends, as you would expect. I think we maybe expected too much too soon, but they're coming good for us lately.
Yeah, I think with all the injuries we've seen this season, they've sort of had to. I think, players like Matt Weaver, Matt O'Reilly, Diego Gomez, they've had to bide their time, because we've got an established team that have done well, because we're still fighting for European places here, but we've also been racked with terrible injuries, so they've had to step up, and it's about those players taking their moments when they can. I thought, quick word on Matt O'Reilly, I thought that he, again, put in a really good shift at that number 10 position. His first instinct when he wins the ball is to look forward, and I really like that in his play. And we talk about João Pedro being such an important player for us, which he is, and we do miss him, and we miss Jorginho Rutter, who's probably been the player that's hit the ground running the most. So it's nice to see players like Matt O'Reilly and Gruder, when given the opportunities, that they can offer something a bit different. They can offer us something still, and be part of the team. We'll talk about Gruder later, but quick word on him. His delivery from set pieces and like dead ball situations has been really fantastic. Of course, we'll talk about the chance he created a little bit later. But before we get onto that, just for contextual reasons, Joe, we have to mention Matt Weaver picking up a yellow card. At first, I thought it was because he bundled through the back of Harvey Barnes, but it wasn't. It was because he picked up the ball. And the reason I mentioned this is because of an incident that occurs a bit later. So bookmark this bit here, or keep this in your mind, listeners, because when I come back to this later, it will make my rant a bit later have just a little bit more sort of ammunition. But Joe, obviously that played a part in the second half, in that we saw Matt's, now I know I'm jumping ahead here, Matt's brought off in the second half for making another tackle, which I'd argue, having seen the replay several more times, that he gets the ball, he touches the ball. I think Newcastle fans, will scream for a red card because he's on a yellow. But from my perspective, it's probably one of those where I don't necessarily think it's worthy of a second yellow, but I can certainly see why there's an argument. That is probably the one thing I think Craig Pawson actually gave us yesterday in any sort of, not favourable, but sort of like he gave us a bit of slack yesterday. But obviously an important bit of context for Matt's game, Joe.
Obviously the yellow card was frustrating in the stadium because one, I didn't really realise, again, like you, Tom, what he got the yellow card for until after. But then something similar happened where a Newcastle player did something similar to us and there was no yellow card. And I think the thing that for me that always angers me is that consistency of the application of the rules not being applied to both teams fairly. And then it just riles you up, and everything else that happened during the game with obviously the 2 VAR calls and completely, missing that and having to rely on that word in your ear to sort of bail you out is not a really a good look for officiating in our country. And yeah, it's just a little bit of a sorry state. But yeah, obviously annoying for Mats because I think he's been doing well at right back, and is a really good player that can, as we've said, put in the balls that are dangerous, and it just changes that whole sort of mindset of how he goes about playing his game. And then we've had to make a few changes here and there. Tarek didn't quite work against Anthony Gordon, so then we had to push him forward and bring Joel Veltman on. So it was good to have all those options to be able to make all those changes. And I thought Hertzler did well to recognise the threats pretty quickly and change it up.
Yeah. Dagan, just a quick word on that substitution there. I think we both said in the group chat wouldn't have been our preference. Would you have preferred to see Joel Veltman come on from the off there?
I most definitely would have, especially because we're in a position where you'd think we'd want to hold on to the lead. So it just felt like Veltman was the option. I guess we opted for pace, but I feel like Weaver was doing the job. Veltman's probably the most physically similar of the available options that we could have put out there. And I just think he's a steadier hand. We've seen Lamptey. Lamptey has some brilliant moments, but he is pretty mistake prone. And gave away a foul almost instantly entering the game that was very nearly a penalty and was called as such because Poston was obviously so eager to give penalties away at every opportunity. But yeah, no, I would have gone with Veltman, and just especially seeing that he then later came on. It is a little shocking that he wasn't the choice. But again, I think decision had to be rooted in we were worried about pace, and we were worried about pace knowing that Gordon was going to come on, which he did. So to be fair, I mean, there's logic to the decision, but I don't know that I would have gone that direction.
Yeah, I think, as you say, Dig, I mean, benefit of hindsight, perhaps. First thing that Lamptey does is give away the foul, Joe. And I'm actually going to cut Pawson a bit of slack on this one because I could see why he might call that as a penalty. So I'm going to give him a bit of slack. The one we'll talk about later, not at all. But no, Lamptey lunges. He sticks the foot out. He dangles the leg out. Gordon goes over. The referee points to a spot. I know in the ground you were messaging us saying what on earth is happening because, of course, in the ground you don't have a clue. It annoyed me slightly that it was really clear from after the first replay that it didn't happen inside the box. I don't know why it took so long to sort of get through to the referee, but eventually it did. How frustrating was it being in the ground, just not having a clue what was going on?
Well, I'll tell you what, you and Dagan soothed a lot of people's nerves in that stadium because I was messaging like, what is going on? What is going on? And then you guys said, no, it's going to be called back. And then I turned around to everyone and I was like, don't worry, guys. The group chat says it's not a penalty. And then sure enough, on the big screen, it comes up, no penalty. And then it happened again later on and people were like, fucking hell, your group chat's great. Have you got ex-referees in there or something? It was good to have that sort of like you guys are watching on TV, so please tell me what's going on because in the stadium you really have no idea. You're waiting and waiting and waiting for the referee to stand there. The players are all wondering what the heck's going on as well, and then eventually they put their arms up and do that, and then they go over to the screen. You don't know what they're watching. It just takes so long. It just takes the momentum out of the crowd, and it just goes quiet. And then until that decision's made, you have not a clue. And then obviously the decision comes up on the big screen, and then they show like a slow motion replay, and everyone was fuming that it was given as a penalty. But as you say, Tom, I've watched it back a few times, and the contact does slightly continue into the box, and you can see why maybe it was given as a pen. So in that sense, yeah, a little bit of slack given, but just they need to do better in the communication to the fans in the ground with VAR.
Remind me, someone for that one, was Pawson sent to the monitor?
Yes.
So for me, I don't know why VAR just can't say it happened outside the box, mate. It's not a penalty. I don't understand why he needs to go to the monitor.
Because it's got to be the referee's call. I know.
Go with the way of rugby.
It's stupid, but
do what rugby.
What's the point? What's the point in a VAR if they're not going to be able to make that decision? But then again, you don't want to take that decision making away from the referee. But they wait for VAR to have a word in their ear. So
exactly,
it's a weird cycle.
For stuff like that, I don't understand why they don't just say, "We've watched it back. It happened outside the box. No penalty." Because then it saves time. It saves everyone's time. Then again, I know that it's about putting the power in the hands of the referee, but you're all officials. You're all officiating a game. If you've spotted something that the referee has missed as a linesman, you put your flag up and you wave. You say, "Oh, that's a foul." Then the ref gives the foul. I don't understand for a situation like that. the referee doesn't need to watch that back. He just needs to be told it happened outside the box. It's not subjective. So why the faffing? But no, it was we have moaned a lot about VAR over the years, but this is what it is meant for. You know, when a call has gone wrong, it's gone the wrong way. It shouldn't have been given. VAR steps in to intervene. Frustrating about not knowing what's happening in the stadium, of course. But no, I'm going to actually jump Dagan straight onto the next VAR call because this one I'm not going to give Pawson any slack at all. Because Willock obviously goes into the box. He simulates contact with Van Hecker. Now, from my angle that I was watching at, Pawson's unsighted. So Pawson can't see the action. So why the hell has he given a penalty? It's just shocking. If he can't see the action, why the hell is he given it? It frustrates me to no end. But again, the referee blows his whistle, points to the spot. VAR have to intervene. Dagan, just how frustrating was that one?
It became more frustrating later because, again, the eagerness to give the penalty, even when there was no line of sight. So he's just blindly interpreting, giving them the penalty and making it VAR's job to fix it. Why not do that later in the match? Why not? Instead of VAR having to overrule the non-call. Two arguably similar situations if he didn't see it. But one, he gives the penalty, and the other, if he didn't see it, right? Like it just, yeah. Like those things get me because, as Joe said, the inconsistency. Stanford makes a good point. The ref would need to know where to place the ball. I guess that could still be said in his ear, to your point, but that is a reasonable reason.
He would have seen it. It would have been inches outside of where the incident happened.
Right.
And let's be honest, the player's going to move the ball anyway. So,
although I guess in this case there wasn't anywhere forward to move it, you'd be in the box. It was certainly close. But no, it's infuriating. You know, they get it right. They give the yellow for simulation. But yeah, it's infuriating, and it certainly feels like the collective is like he was dying to give a penalty, and he was dying to give away dangerous free kicks too. Which in the penalty hemming and hawing, the one that ends up being the goal wasn't the only dangerous free kick that was dubious. There were a number of free kicks awarded to Newcastle in this game that had me howling at the screen. They just didn't result in a goal the way the eventual one did. I can't imagine being in the stadium. I can't imagine the level of vitriol that I would have if surrounded by other people who are equally mad instead of being at home where people are chill out.
It was rough because obviously after 2 VAR calls of a referee getting a decision wrong on the pitch, having to go over to the monitor again, so that it just goes to prove the incompetency of our referees and how they don't use their brains and wait for a voice in their ear. People were saying, obviously for the Ayari one, if he goes to the monitor this time and gets it wrong, there's going to be an absolute uproar. Obviously, lucky for Pawson that Ayari did decide to try and play basketball in our box, but yeah, just really frustrating in the stadium. And yeah, as you can imagine, Dagan, when 30,000 people are angry, it's quite the noise. Someone said on Twitter that we need to be getting on the referees back earlier, but weirdly, it was that in the stadium yesterday. It was we after about 15 minutes when the UEFA incident happened, and then they weren't given the yellow card for exactly the same thing. We changed our tune and we were like, this isn't right. And then the more it goes on, yeah, we're just getting really angry. So it's not good for the brain.
No, as I say, I'm willing to give Pawson the benefit of the doubt for the first one. But the second one, when you don't have a clear line of sight, blowing up for a penalty it's shocking officiating, absolutely shocking. So yeah, we're going to stay on penalties because we might as well. Joe, we had a very our own penalty shout. As was it Tonali goes through the back of Matt O'Reilly, does make contact, goes through the back of him. Ref, good line of sight this time. the referee, who's already been quite whistle happy for Newcastle in the penalty area, didn't even blink, didn't even put his whistle to his lips, even thinking about it. He just watched it happen and went, "Nah, that's fine, mate. You lads do what you want." In the ground, what was the initial reaction when Matt O'Reilly went to the floor?
I was convinced he was going to point to the spot. Convinced. And the moment he didn't, he does that finger wag. As you say, Tom, VAR look for that finger wag and they don't get involved when they see that. Watching it back today, I've watched the slow motion version. I've created an even more slow motion version for myself so I can get a bit more clarity. Matt O'Reilly arrives at the ball, goes to shield the ball, and then gets kicked in the back of the leg. I think VAR haven't got involved. One, because of the finger wag, and two, because Fabian Schär stood in the way. How lucky for them that Fabian Schär seemed to arrive at that exact moment. I'm not saying Fabian Schär looked at the cameras and went, yeah. But it's just, really frustrating because if you watch it back, there is clear contact. I keep saying Matt's Vifa. Shut up, Joe. Matt O'Reilly gets to the ball first and is cleared out. How is that not a penalty? I don't understand.
Yeah, it reminded me quite a lot of a few seasons ago where was it Luca Digne kicked Solly March? It was just like, yeah, you've just kicked that player. It's fine. I think what made it even more frustrating was just the context. As I say, we've seen a referee already be very whistle happy when Newcastle players fell over in the box when he's got a clear line, when he doesn't have a clear line of sight, but when it happens and a Brighton player actually does get kicked, he doesn't give it. I'm starting to think then either A, he's got a clear bias, B, he's lost his nerve, and because he's had 2 penalty calls already overturned, he doesn't want to set his stall out again.
I guarantee if he blows up for that, VAR won't get involved. They don't look at it.
No, I don't think they would. I think they'd certainly say there's definite clear contact and that's a penalty. Dagan, a quick word on the Matt O'Reilly one. I think we both said at the time that it would have been a soft penalty, but there's definite contact.
Yeah, I mean, it would feel harsh and unlucky, but it's the kind of call that happens all the time. And that we've had given against us multiple times this year where you're like, ooh, that's, right? And we just sort of sink down and go, oh, that's just a mess. Like it was a poor decision by Tonali. There was probably no real urgency there. O'Reilly's backs to goal. Maybe he gets a foot on it, tries a back heel. Maybe I don't, but he went through it. He clatters through him. And that is just so consistently a penalty. It's infuriating watching it back. It was worse. I know we keep seeing the one angle that was obscured by Schär, but this is a shocker. In the Premier League, there's more than one camera angle. Not to mention all the coverage after the fact. I know we're going to talk about Barnes, but the Barnes free kick foul, they never showed it. In any of the post game, they'll show the goal, they'll show the free kick, but they're not going to show the bogus foul that was given on the edge of the box. Barnes throwing himself to the ground when the tackle was clean as all get out. I think it was JP won the ball. Really, really carrying a lot of frustration over this one.
It's and I just want to bring up what Joanna's just said in the comments about the Sky Ref Watch program. And a lot of the people saying it was a 50-50, with some saying yes, it should have been a pen, and others saying no. But they've all said that it was understandable if Brighton fans were feeling aggrieved. And I think, as I say, it's the context of it all. If the 2 previous penalty shouts from Pawson or the penalty calls don't happen, maybe you don't feel as annoyed about the whole situation. But because they do happen, and because we've already seen what we would perceive as Brighton fans as a clear double standard in officiating, it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And it's similar to the aggravation we felt all those years ago, Joe, when we came away from that Spurs game absolutely raging. And it felt very similar yesterday. Now, I am quickly going to give the referee and the official a bit of a reprieve, because I think whilst we definitely can point our fingers at the officials, Joe, and talk about their shortcomings, we've got to talk about the fact that in the second half, Brighton just didn't look particularly threatening for a lot of the game in the second half. Yes, we had the moments at the end, which we'll talk about shortly. But a lot of the Newcastle fans' accusations were after the 60th minute, we just sat back and we weren't interested. Do you believe that, Joe? Do you think we didn't show enough character going forward? Or do you think we sort of just defended well? We did what we needed to do, and that was fine, which exactly what we did at St. James's Park earlier in the season.
I think Dagan wants this one.
Fire away, Dagan.
Go on, Dagan.
Go ahead. Go on. I'm curious what you're going to say.
Me, I think it was probably just us sticking to a game plan that hurts the head, get ahead, and then sit back and try and defend what you've got and see it out. Are you okay, Dagan?
No, exactly. And if we hadn't done that, he'd have been naive. Like, it's infuriating. It's so, like, I cannot stand it that the armchair quarterback, hindsight's 2020, if then statements that get made about the manager making a bad decision, right? Oh, we didn't show enough in attack. And I'm sure there's a happy medium that would be perfect for every fan, that they would say that was exactly the right amount of pushing forward for a second where we didn't jeopardize too much. But often the manager is going to make a decision to be one or the other, right? We're going to go forward to get a second because we feel like Newcastle is going to score, or we think we can sit back and we can fight this out. And daggone it, for the most part, we did. Like, the goal we conceded was a total anomaly. You had that free kick 100 times. AR, you would think, would not put his arm out any more than once. I mean, gosh knows what's going through his mind. But, like, that's not the manager. I thought, again, and I know no one here is saying it is, but just, the question is out of people raising that issue, Tom, where it's like, well, we weren't really looking for that second goal, and it kind of bit us. Like, sure it did, but if it had bit us because we were trying to get the second goal and they counter and score because we've got too many players pushed forward, then we say, well, it happened again.
It just reminded me a lot of our performance at St. James's Park, where we found a way to go forwards and then we stuck in. And after that game, everyone was like, Fabian Hertzler, you changed the way we're going to play football. It wasn't pretty, but you got us a result, and we were lauding him for it. And as you say, Dagan, now it's like, oh, well, we didn't score more than one goal at home to Newcastle. That's the reason why we didn't win. And it's like, well, we've had Newcastle's number twice this season, and we've defended pretty resolutely against them at the Amex. And as you say, Dagan, like, it's a complete, like, just one of those things where they've got the penalty in the end and have found their way to draw the game. I don't think if they had been given the penalty, they would have found a way to draw. Bart had a fantastic game, was saving left, right, and centre. The save he made after the Ayari handball was ridiculous. And then later from Callum Wilson as well. It would have been another man of the match performance from Bart Verbruggen, but no one's talking about that because he didn't save a penalty.
Are you prepared, Dagan? Are you prepared?
Just for you, Joe. Just for you.
I agree.
You want me to swear? You want me to swear? If you want me to swear, I'll swear. Tip of the cap to old Graham Potter, who we brought him to the verge of swearing. Poor guy. No, it is enough to make you want to swear. Though I resist the temptation.
Here's one. I'll say something that might make you swear, Dagan. I agree with you. I do. You know what? I'm going to hold my hands up, and I'm going to be honest, because that's what we're about on this podcast. I've been critical of the way we've played at times, but actually, I thought we got the game plan spot on yesterday. Newcastle, they offered nothing. For all of like the people I've seen on Blue Sky and North Stand chat saying, "Oh, Newcastle were the better team," I'm like, really? I thought they offered very little going forward. I thought we completely had their number. So I wasn't too fussed about the fact that we weren't pouring forward, because I thought to myself, if we hit them on the counter, great. But if we don't, they've offered nothing. So
and No
I'm
one's talking
chill.
about the fact that how quiet we had Alexander Isak.
Exactly. He did
We had
nothing.
him pushed. We had him pushed out wide so many times yesterday,
Exactly.
and it was a delight to see.
Yeah. We played a really fantastically crafted game yesterday. I thought the tactics from Herzler and the team was spot on. I'm going to give him that. But now we're going to get into angry mode because Newcastle are a bunch of dirty, cheating twats. The amount of times they went down is just pathetic. And I know, but we all do it. And I know João Pedro's awful for it. And I lambast him when he does it as well. So I'm going to put it out there because I'm nothing but if not consistent. Harvey Barnes falling over nothing to win that free kick has sent me to Mars, my friends, because that free kick, which leads to the penalty, is an absolute travesty. Absolute travesty. So let's get into it, shall we? The moment where it all unwinds and Pawson finally gets what he wants. Van Hecker puts his foot in. Harvey Barnes sees his foot, falls over. Newcastle win a free kick. Clearly simulation. Clear simulation. Joe, I'm very cross about this.
Pawson's looked at that challenge and he's gone, it's outside of the box. VAR can't get involved with that one, so I'll give them that, and hopefully they'll score from that. Obviously, yeah, we couldn't have controlled that. Ayari sort of lifted his arm, then couldn't get his arm out of the way quick enough, so it looked like he's playing basketball. Really frustrating that free kick's given, and I'm just tired of it, Tom. Like, I can't even bring myself to get angry anymore about officials in our league. I've done that too many times. I think I used all my anger after that Spurs game a couple of years ago when we went live straight on the full-time whistle. That was probably now, Joe. What did I say? Did I say anything wrong? But yeah, I don't know. I'm just tired of it, and it doesn't come as a surprise to me that they're given a free kick for that.
Dagan, any words? Any words for the just sheer incompetence from the officials, the play acting from Newcastle? Any words that you want to just sprinkle out before we talk about the Ayari's hands?
Angry. Yeah, no, just I'm infuriated. It's just, yeah. I really think simulation should be reviewable by VAR in any area of the pitch. And I think simulation of a head injury should be an instant red card. You should be sent off. That, like, it would fix it because it's such an issue. But guys falling over when there's no contact, that should be fixable because it decides games, and that should not be the basis that decides the result. Is, oh well, he fell over skillfully. Like, think about that. Like, that's the measure of the match.
He cheated well.
Yeah, that's what it amounts to. And it's like we have the technology to look at it quickly. And again, if it's not egregious, sure. But why can't VAR, within a certain point, even in the attacking half, say, you know what, that you missed it, bud. That's not a foul. Free kick the other way. Like, it would just be so easy and so fast. Especially given all the pomp and circumstance it takes to set up for a free kick. It's not like it's instantaneous. So just don't hold them up. Let them get set up, and then if it's not, they can't take it, don't take it.
Like you say, Tom, rugby check everything leading up to a try. Everything. So why can't VAR get involved with everything all over the pitch? Why does it have to be in a penalty area? It's ridiculous.
It is. I've said it for years, and I get that people will say that rugby is a lot slower than football, and it is. But I think when you've got these situations where teams benefit from cheating, I think there has to be a point where, as you say, Dagan, that the punishments need to be harsher. Yesterday, I don't know if you guys have seen it. Is it Clattenburg? He went on, I think it was like a sports thing, and he was saying about like the goalkeepers, and he had this idea that if the goalkeepers held on to the ball or time wasted, he'd give the opposition a corner. I love that idea. Imagine what Pope would have done if instead of falling down, if he knew that actually he's fine, the referee went, blow, right, Brighton corner, you wouldn't do it again. Pickford wouldn't be holding onto the ball, falling over it. Martinez won't be wasting time. We need to find ways to cut this crap out of the game. And I know some people will say, oh, it's the dark arts. It's all part of football. It's not. It ruins the game. It ruins the experience.
There's better dark arts that you can have rather than just completely and blatantly cheating. Like, for example, Joel Veltman. Just look at him as a perfect example. He does everything by the book, but does it in a way that is going to get the other team in trouble. It's not cheating. Yeah. It's just being smart.
Yeah. I think, as Stanford just said, 10 minutes in bin. I bet, again, if Pope goes down pretending to be injured after doing absolutely nothing for the last 20 minutes or whatever it was, why is he not carded? Why is he not put in, like, given that blue card, sin bin, corner to Brighton? Then we need to find better ways of, getting rid of this unpleasant part of the game.
Is it just resistance to change?
I think so. I think football is steeped in tradition and history, and people don't like change. That's why I think a lot of people hated the idea of VAR when it first came about, because even though it could stop, and I get there's a lot of things about that VAR is wrong, like about VAR that I don't like, but initially it was that, it's tradition, it's changing. I mean, the change from like the Football League to the Premier League was like met with a lot of resistance. Yeah. So like, people don't like it when you mess with football. They just don't.
Imagine the version of yesterday's game that has them getting 3 penalties and us getting none.
Yep.
Like if you've ever thought, I would rather not have VAR. Like that's, yeah. I think it's getting more right than it's getting wrong at this point. It's not perfect, but it's closer to accurate. It has to be faster. It doesn't make sense why it takes so long. That needs to be fixed. And I think before they, add anything new, rightly, they need to figure out how to go more quickly than they do.
Something they need to do very, very quickly and very, very simply, because they definitely have the technology to do it, is mic up the officials. Let us put our earphones in like they do at rugby so we can hear what the referee is saying. Transparency would be the key to make people relax about things. If you can understand why a decision's being made and the thought process behind it, I love watching those audio release VAR things because I love hearing what the referee is saying to the players. It teaches me so much and it would give fans so much. Do that.
Yeah. If they played that audio in the stadium, the hush of the crowd, it would actually create some drama instead of just, dead air. Stanford said as much in the chat. Good stuff going in the chat.
Yeah. Why can't we see it live on the big screen? Again, they do it in rugby. We have a cousin with a slightly different shaped ball that do it a billion times better than in football. Just so much better. And I know they've been doing it for a lot longer, but it's right there. All we've got to do is take the best parts of the TMO from rugby and just put it into football. It shouldn't be this hard. But yeah, again, the free kick that never deserved to be a free kick. I can't believe there are some people actually who look at that and went, that's definitely a free kick. It's not. It's simulation. It's appalling from Barnes, and it leads to Craig Pawson gleefully, and I bet inside he was so happy that he managed to point to the spot for the 3rd time that day and say, lads, there you go. There's your penalty.
1 for 4. Congratulations. 1 for 4, you dolt.
Awful from him. But just before we talk about the penalty, Joe, you've already mentioned it. The Bart Verbruggen save was genuinely pretty spectacular.
I mean, he's got a lot of critics over the last few weeks, maybe rightly so. I think he's been beaten pretty easily at times, and he's just shut everybody up. He is the Dutch #1 for a reason. He's got such a high ceiling. He's being looked at by other teams for a reason. So we just have to stick by him and trust him. Obviously, I was someone that was maybe thinking, why not give Rushworth a go if Bart Verbruggen's being looked at by other teams? But if we can keep hold of him, he's going to be our #1 every time.
Yeah. And let's be honest, Bart is a goalkeeper. He's only, 22, 23? Goalkeepers, generally don't hit their peak until the late 20s. He's still got a lot of learning to do. And, we've said it on the podcast before, and I'm sure Aaron would, back me up if he was here. As a goalkeeper, it's one of those, it's the position where if you make a mistake, you've got nowhere to hide. If you, as a striker or as a winger or even as a midfielder, if you make a mistake, there are people covering behind you that can sort of mop up your mess. If you're a goalkeeper and you make a mistake, 9 times out of 10, it's going to lead to a situation that you don't want to find yourself in. And,
sorry, Tom, we had Aaron on a few weeks ago, and he'd done a few goalkeeper myth bustings. There's such like people saying a goalkeeper can't get beaten at their near post. Well, of course they can. If the shot's more powerful than how quickly you can react, you can be beaten from anywhere. But yeah, sorry. I'll let you carry on.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, he's got a lot to learn, and we've got to be honest. And we've got to say, look, there are stats that show that he's made mistakes that have led to goal scoring opportunities, but he's also kept us in games, and he's also won us games because of the saves he's made. So I think I'm all about sort of critiquing and analysing honestly. So when he makes those mistakes, that's okay to point out, but we've also got to point out when he comes to our rescue. And I think, yesterday he did, because I wonder if that had gone in, that header, I wonder if the ref would have blown up for the penalty, would play the advantage. Interesting. But either way, Yari was dangling his hand out from that free kick. It hits his hand. There's no doubt about it. It was a penalty. Dagan and Newcastle tuck it away, which is a complete and utter gut punch, considering, as I say, Newcastle offered very little before that. A lot of possession, but very little penetration.
Yeah, it was a gut punch. Perfectly placed penalty, as you would expect from Isak. There wasn't really much Bart could do about that one. The does he ever save a penalty? Like, not one like that for sure. That one wasn't savable. If I just come back to the Bart discussion, what he's doing is really incredible to be a starter in the Premier League of a team at our level right now. And we know he's the Dutch number one. I'm just going to read you the ages of the starting goalkeepers of the non-relegated sides in the Premier League. Alisson, 32. Raya, 29. Ederson, 31. Sells, 33. Pope, 33. Sanchez, 27. Martinez, 32. Leno, 33. Kepa, 30. Verbruggen, 22. Flecken, 31. Henderson, 28. Pickford, 31. Onana, 29. Sa, 32. Vicario, 28. Areola, 32. He's 5 years younger than the second youngest. And there are only a few in their 20s at all. Who are within 5 years of him? All three keepers for the relegated sides. Muric, 26. Hermansen, 24. Ramsdale, 26. Right? Ramsdale was a starter for Arsenal. They made a move. They went and got Raya with a little more experience, and he's to be fair, has done well for them. But I don't think it makes Ramsdale a terrible keeper. But he may not have been ready for those bright lights. I think for us, we probably can't afford, with our wage structure, the keeper that is at the highest level. And I think if we look around the Premier League, I don't know that we want one of those guys, because again, you're getting a declining asset that you're not going to see return on. And we are still a club, for better or worse, that is trying to make a profit from sales, because we are not a global phenomena like the bigger clubs, nor are we backed by
how unnatural Pope looked with the ball at his feet as well.
Yeah,
I think take it into, as you say, Dagan, the decline of the traditional goalkeeper, and we've got an up and coming goalkeeper who is comfortable with the ball at his feet. Ederson, obviously, and Alisson are on another level, but none of those other goalkeepers are nowhere near as comfortable with the ball at their feet as Verbruggen.
Yeah. It shows the development of the game. I mean, look at Man United. They had one of the best shot stoppers in the world in De Gea. They moved him on because he wasn't, good with the ball at his feet. They got Onana, who was supposed to be one of the best, and look how appalling he is. But I think football's shifting back towards a more direct style of play. I enjoy football tactics. I enjoy football analysis, and a lot of the analysis I'm watching and listening to at the moment is that they're actually, the whole build up from the back is changing slightly more back towards the more direct approach that we saw. It's really interesting how football fluctuates. And I know we're sort of getting off track, but I think what will make Bart Verbruggen one of the best keepers in the world is his ability to know when to go long and when to keep it short. That will be for him, like that will send him to the next level. Because I think some of those older keepers, they're probably, you say Joe Pope's not going to be that sort of ball at your feet keeper. You need a keeper that can do both. And I think Bart Verbruggen's that man. I think he can do both. So it'd be really interesting to watch his future, regardless of how long he's at Albion for, to see how he develops in that part of the game. But again, it's really interesting. Again, what I've enjoyed about this season is watching the likes of Pep Guardiola having to change his tactics, how we've gone from a very structured De Zerbi style into something very, very different. And it's, again, for someone like myself who really enjoys football tactics, it's been a fascinating watch this season, not just in England, but across Europe as well, with the way things are just developing. So, yeah, I know we're digressing, but it's just an interesting watch that I will be keeping my eyes on as we move into pre-season, especially because that's when I start thinking that Fabian's going to really start putting more of a stamp on things. I certainly hope so anyway. Ayari's dangling hand leads to the penalty. Brighton are pegged back at 1-1. Newcastle completely undeserved. Then we have a moment where we look, for all intents and purposes, like we're going to win the game. Gruder's on the pitch and he puts in a simply delightful ball, like genuinely excellent. We're talking Pascal Gross, Alexis McAllister level of delivery. Diego Gomez unmarked, 6 yards from goal, and he can't get it on target. Joe, in the stadium, did you have your head in your hands?
I was convinced it was going to end up in the back of the net. And when I saw Diego falling through with his head in his hands into the net himself, I was absolutely gutted. And there's been obviously a lot of people saying, is he ready? And, sort of making a judgment based on that one missed chance where he's put in some really good performances when he's come in. And the thing about Diego Gomez, it doesn't excuse the missed chance because he should have buried that and he was fresh legs off the bench. But I think a lot of people are forgetting that he's played 18 months of football. He was in the MLS last season from the start to the finish. He's come to us and he's continued to play football. So the explosive Diego Gomez we saw at the start was coming in and being really muscly and shaking people off and progressing the ball forward really well. Maybe isn't the same Diego Gomez what we're seeing at the moment because he's just absolutely knackered. I'm not putting that down to the miss. He should have scored that, absolutely. And I think the key for Diego Gomez is getting that first goal, and then I think he'll start contributing a lot more because he is a fantastic player. And I really hope that he doesn't take that too harshly because he got into a great position. He keeps doing that. He will score some goals for the Albion. So he needs to keep doing that.
He does. It was fantastic. Positioning from him to find that space, and I think it was something that Solly March said after the West Ham game about how difficult it is to come onto a game where you're playing with players that have already been on the pitch for either the 60 minutes, 70 minutes, 80 minutes, and you're fresh. I reckon if he had been on the pitch for 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, he would have scored that because he would have been up to the pace of the game. He would have found his touch. And I'm not saying that as a slight against him or the subs from Herzler. I'm just saying I think that with the benefit of being on the pitch a bit longer, he perhaps does score that goal. And I'm sure he'll be very disappointed that didn't go in. But it just wasn't our day, unfortunately. But it wasn't over then, Dagan, because the last thing that Bart Verbruggen had to do was make a fantastic save against Callum Wilson, who, if you remember my little tidbit earlier, did exactly the same thing that Mats Vifa did by picking up the ball and wasn't booked. You want to talk about inconsistent refereeing performances. You want to talk about you're Brighton, you just saw you didn't win. This is the stuff that we're angry about. All we ask for is consistency. Callum Wilson does exactly the same thing that Mats Vifa does and doesn't get booked. It's fucking infuriating.
There's the swear. Thanks, Tom, on my behalf. Getting that out there. Not only was he not booked for picking the ball up, they were allowed a substitute at that moment when we were not subbing.
And Danny Welbeck then got booked because he complained about it.
Yeah. Welbeck also was fouled a gazillion times without drawing a call, but that's separate. Tom, if I may, can I speak to the comment in the chat? Have we actually got a style? The answer is we do, but we also have a manager who adapts. And I've got an article I'm working on for the Daily Seagull, sort of a spinoff from North Stand Chat, that's going to talk about this in great detail. But I'm going to try to summarize as we watch our friends Caicedo and McAllister have a ton of success. And we know Caicedo was purchased for $115 million. McAllister is being talked about for 90 plus. Right, we're talking about an over $200 million midfield duo. I know we didn't see all that return from them, but the quality of these guys is immense. And there's a 38-game season that you Brighton fans don't remember. But there are 38 games that were magical, where we had a plus 21 goal differential over those 38 games. We earned 66 points from those 38 games. That season doesn't make sense in your minds because that season happened at the end of 21-22. When Graham Potter, after one of the worst stretches in our history, decided to start Caicedo and McAllister together for the first time. So following the Norwich 0-0 draw that followed 6 consecutive losses, being outscored 12-1, we started that duo and changed our fortunes, having been talked about for Champions League during part of that season. I went back and read the articles because we were pushing. We plummeted with that run of bad results. Calls for Potter out. Speeches about history lessons and other things. Don't shout, shoot. Were all happening during that stretch of time. But the insertion of those two changed our fortunes. And over that season and then the season that followed, with under Potter's leadership and then into De Zerbi's leadership, with those two on the pitch. Okay. Here are the numbers. Those two starting together, I should say, not just on the pitch. .74 points per match. 1.74 points per match. 38 matches exactly, 66 points. That's been good enough for between 4th and 6th every season we've been to the Premier League. Every season. So with those two guys, we are a contender for Champions League. We are a European outfit. In Potter's era, 21-22 alone, our 9th place year. Okay, so we vaulted that year at the end of the season from 13th to 9th, our best ever finish. We had 5 wins, 2 draws, and 1 loss in those games with McAllister and Caicedo starting. That season up to that point, in 30 matches, we had 34 points. That's 1.13 points per match under Potter without Caicedo and McAllister in 21-22. Same lineup. Okay. Under De Zerbi. So this would be 22-23 with those two when he didn't have them both in the lineup, and then all of 23-24 because they were gone at that point. De Zerbi had 46 matches and earned 60 points. That's 1.3 points per match. Now, I say this to say that entire time, we have been at a rate that would have us in every year of the 8 that we've been in the Premier League between 11th and 13th. 11th and 13th. Potter, De Zerbi. Those are the games without those two guys. Now, I know we spent money to replace those guys this year, but when you think about who those guys were, okay, De Zerbi had Baleva last year, and I know people would say he's gotten a lot better. I think when we saw him on the pitch last year, he was our best player. De Zerbi thought he wasn't ready. Our young manager this year, without those two players. 35 matches, 52 points. It's 1.49 points per match. All right, so that's nearly a fifth of a point more than De Zerbi. You can say he had Europe last year, but the numbers weren't any better the prior year without Caicedo and McAllister. So our style is maybe not as defined as under De Zerbi, but it is more adaptable and probably more akin to Potter, but the results are far better. And sure, maybe we have a better team than we did prior to 21-22, but that team in 21-22 fared very, very well. And people forget we lost Mwepu from our midfield. We had Gross in that midfield alongside these other guys. I know it's a long little rant, but I think the two goals that everyone attributed to individual brilliance against West Ham, those goals were from zone 14. And what Herzler's attack does in overloading and pushing the defense deeper and deeper with a greater number of players getting forward opens up space in zone 14 where passes can be made, or if the defense sits back, shots can be taken from long range. I don't have the charts, but I would say we've seen a lot of long range shots. And people keep talking about how we've seen goals this season like no other. That's a part of it. It's because we're creating space in a zone where increasingly, as defenses do sit back, there's the availability to strike, especially when you give yourself time and space to do it. So while that may not seem like beautiful, we're making 8,000 passes to go nowhere, which we also complained about, I do think we have a style. I think he's adapted so it doesn't look, if you watch Herzler ball on film, right, and you go look at what he did at St. Pauli, it doesn't look exactly like that. I think that's both a personnel issue, and I think it's the Premier League is just a little tougher than the Bundesliga too. That's not surprising. So he's having to adapt. But I do think we have a style. I do think our manager adapts game to game. And I will tell you, his results are better without those two star players. Brighton has only been really a European contender in the time when we had Caicedo and McAllister starting games together. In the rest of our time, this is the best we've done, right? Is to been around 10th place, because we've been 11th to 13th with the other two prior managers in the 4 seasons cumulatively that have been our best. So that's the reality of how Brighton has done. And the best season we've ever had was just a result, largely, not just, but that stretch of 38 games with the best 2 players, you can make a case, have worn the shirt in recent years. And I think it's a fair case that those 2 guys are at that level. One's a World Cup winner and now a Premier League champion. And Caicedo is, you know, whether you like him or not, he's one of the best midfielders in the game right now.
Can we just say,
yeah, that was excellent, Dagan. No,
Dagan Road, your bloody research is something to bloody behold. You wonderful man.
Yeah. Ooh, and Stanford has just chipped in. I think Baleba is better than Caicedo. I think Baleba has a higher ceiling, potentially, but they're also very different players. Baleba reminds me a lot more of Yves Bissouma, but I think Baleba will go on to be far better than Bissouma is or was. Just quickly as well, just in regards to the style, and I'll chip in on this, Stanford, as well, because I've been just certainly at the start very sort of critical of, we don't have a clear identifiable style, we don't have that. But I also wonder if that's because under De Zerbi it was, this is the way we play, and it was so regimented that it was clear that we'd sit back, we'd put our foot on the ball, we'd draw in the press. But where that went wrong was when people picked up on that and we didn't have a way to counter it, because it was just, they just sit back. But as I say, football is adapting again. It's becoming more direct. Teams are becoming less and less, rigid in their structure. And I think De Zerbi failed to be adaptable, whereas hers has been far more adaptable. I think you could argue that De Zerbi ball might have looked prettier when we first came together. Remember that game against Wolves, and we were just, it looked beautiful, but it didn't always work. Whereas Herzler ball might not always look pretty, but it's actually, as Dagan has just demonstrated, actually yielded, very favourable results. And I think, and I know I don't want to use it as an excuse because I hope that it's not taken as such, but obviously the injuries we've sustained this year have been, just really difficult. Some of the worst injuries we've had in the league. And I know, again, March and Milner probably attribute to a lot of those minutes lost. But even so, when you've had João Pedro, Dunk, Van Hecke, Webster, Igor, I think pretty much every member of the squad has been injured at some point this season. Yeah. Pretty much every single member of the squad.
Yeah. Any player that's injured at the start, interestingly, that run at the start doesn't count towards your accrued injury days. So March did not actually count. So we're first, even with that, not counted, his initial stretch. You're right, Tom. And again, people make a lot about this $200 million we spent. It wasn't all for now. And again, many of those players have been among those injured. Kadioglu, who is our highest paid player right now, or tied as our highest paid player with Dunk, has been missing almost the entire season and had one of our goals of the season probably in his brief tenure. He was pretty impressive. Again, was also getting up to speed, but certainly with the ball at his feet, looked like a promising talent for us. Weaver's getting up to speed. O'Reilly suffered a terrible injury. MINTEH and Jorginho have been healthy for the most part. Jorginho's loss now seemed crippling. The money we spent was not all on veteran players who were going to come in Premier League ready to win now. We did spend a lot of money, but I just don't think they're great examples of that equating to wins. We're still 15th in wages. I know I beat this drum all the time, but if you look historically at what correlates with success, it's the wage bill. We are an anomaly. And while it's reasonable to expect that we're going to overperform, I think it's tough to ask that we're going to overperform 6, 7, 8 other clubs every season. That just doesn't seem reasonable, right? Right now, Bournemouth and Forest are way outperforming their wages, but they're the only ones. Other than us, who again, we're still outperforming our wages. So the injury list where we're top, the squad age where we're second youngest, right? These things matter. We're all pointing to, we have this young and experienced manager, and that's the issue. And it's just not. And I believe with everything in my being that if we had retained De Zerbi, we are worse this year and fighting where United and Spurs are at best, because he was found out. He's gone to League One. He was high flying. They were winning everything. They might win the league. Now they're still in second, but they're 2 points off sixth, right? In League One. And I'm sorry, League One is not the Premier League. But again, teams have adapted to him. They've learned that system, and the unchanging nature is fool's gold. It looks great when it works, but when he gets picked apart, and it's bad. And we saw it last spring. And so the revisionists that tell us that De Zerbi, because of his aura, just shut up. Okay. It doesn't matter. His aura was a jerk face, I think, most of the time is what it turned into. I don't want to say
that's about as close we're going to get to Dagan swearing.
It is. But clearly he alienated people at the club, skipping press conferences. The guy, yeah. I think as his career plays out, I think we're going to see that he rubs people the wrong way, ruffles feathers. And some might say that's what we need. But I don't think at a club like this that's a slow, progressive build, trying to get something great, that's the right manager for us. And watching more closely, Hurstler seems to have taken the criticism to heart. He's spending a lot more time on the touchline lately and being a little bit more animated. I don't think that's his style, and I think that's okay. Some of the best coaches sit with their arms crossed and think and talk with their assistants and then get up when they have something to say. Just standing there with your arms crossed angrily does not make you a better manager. And I think I saw stats earlier this year where that is true. There's no correlation between time on the touchline and team success. It's all about style. So anyway, sorry. This has been my bugaboo, and it's why I haven't been on the podcast more this year, because I'm just so sick of the narratives that aren't rooted in reality, but cling to, well, we blew this lead and we blew that lead. Fulham has blown more points from a leading position than we have this year, right? They can be just as mad. Brentford, I guess prior to yesterday, had lost one fewer from leading positions than us. It's not just us. And they have plenty of veteran managers, right? I think it's the quality of the teams in this league. And I know we did it against two of the most frustrating teams to do it against. But Wolves are proving themselves now to not be an awful side. And I think the fact that they could become one of the hottest teams in the league indicates how tough the league is across the board and how much parity there is. Anyway, sorry, I've said way too much. And this is why I should not be on all the time. But goodness gracious, I had a lot to say. So thank you for hearing me out.
It's why you should be on all the time, Dagan, because you've built all of this stuff up that you need to say.
You mentioned, Dagan, there about the league getting tougher. I mean, it is. I mean, you point them out. Look at Spurs. Look at United. I think that what we've seen over the last 2 years as well indicates that the league generally is getting a lot more competitive. I think that there is a gargantuan gap between the Championship and the Premier League now. We've seen that this year. We saw that last year, and I imagine we'll see it next year as well. But this season, I think, has proved that all teams have been consistently inconsistent at times throughout the season. We've strung runs together where we've won like six in a row, and then we've lost 5, and then we drew 1, but that's just the nature of the league this year. And even though we've gone through those bad patches, well, don't get me wrong, I've been really frustrated that we didn't seemingly turn up against Palace or Villa or whatever, but we're still in the fight for Europe. And I think the last 3 games, are so important. And Dagan, I believe, we're against Wolves next, who are one of the form teams in the league. Another one for me that I'd like to win, because they're a team that a lot of people around where I live support. It's going to be a tough old game, Dagan. What do you suspect will be our game plan against them?
I think we'll have to make Aït-Nouri work and play in behind. MINTEH, I think, will be key. Again, Aït-Nouri gets so far forward. That matchup, I think, will be tantalizing to watch because he also will force MINTEH to track back to help deal with him. Cunha and Strand Larsen have both, found the back of the net quite a bit here over the past month and a half, 2 months. Since Cunha's been back anyway. He adds a different dynamic to that team. There's no surprise. He's being looked at by some of the top clubs. I hope it may work in our favor that João Pedro ends up staying because Cunha becomes the preferred target of the clubs who are looking. I think they're similar players. Cunha, I think, a little senior and maybe a little more polished at this point. But it's going to be hard for us to keep the ball out of the back of the net the way they're playing. And so, especially at home, the only thing I can think is they're not really playing for anything. They're too far back, but they're playing for pride, and I don't know. I worry about this one.
I think it worries me more when teams aren't playing for something because that pressure's off. They're not going to get relegated. There's less chance of them overthinking and slipping up. So it's just, as you say, Dagan, pride, and they're at home. They want to give their fans a reason to believe next season that they could not be in a relegation dogfight up until the last 6 game weeks. It's going to be a really tough game.
I wonder where we'll see Gruda in this lineup because he's been fantastic, and it makes me wonder, has he earned a start at the 10?
I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because you could argue that Matt O'Reilly probably didn't do anything wrong to deserve being rotated out. But I do agree, Dagan. I've liked the look of Gruda over the last few weeks, and his dead ball situations and deliveries have been genuinely excellent. So I'd like to see more of him as the run-in sort of progresses. I forgot to ask, gents, player of the match. So if I could get a player to pick out, I'll go first if you like. I'm going to pick, because I think that you guys might pick others. I'm just going to give a shout out to young Jack Hinchelwood. I thought he was really solid in the middle of the park. Really nice to see him back in the middle instead of being at right back. I thought sort of it just personified his game. We mentioned it, Dagan, in the group chat. Start of the second half, Newcastle got in really easily out wide, but Jack's alert to the danger. I just thought he had a really tidy performance. So I just want to give out a shout out to Jack. So whilst I probably would argue that someone like MINTEH probably deserves the acclaim of player of the match for his goal and his hard work rate, I just want to give out a shout to young Jackie Hinchelwood. Joe, who was your player of the match?
I agree with the comments that have just come in. Bart Verbruggen for me was excellent, and again, as I said earlier, proven why people should, especially including me. I was saying that Rushworth or Still should have come in for today's game, but he's proven why he's the Dutch number one, and proven why he's being touted for sort of 50-60 million move away to Bayern Munich or someone like that. So, Bart Verbruggen for me.
Very good, very good, very good. And for yourself, Dagan?
I have a siren going off. We're getting a severe thunderstorm warning. It should stop momentarily.
Oh dear, that's not what you need. I hope there's no tornadoes coming your way, Dagan. That'd be the scariest thing about living in America for me. I've seen enough tornadoes in Florida from a distance that would terrify me. So seeing one close up would probably send shivers down my spine. I thought it was a pretty solid performance yesterday. Just didn't get our just rewards. Thanks in part to one Craig Pawson. Now, just before we sign off, Joe, you wanted to have a quick chat because the women today, the Brighton Hove Albion women's team, have had a spectacular result, and I know you just wanted to give them a shout out.
Yep, a stellar result for the women. 4-2 win against Arsenal. Arsenal had a really, really bad result against Aston Villa a week ago as well. So maybe didn't come as a surprise. But then again, maybe it is a surprise because you'd expect Arsenal and the caliber of players that they've got to come back and react and beat a little old Brighton side. But wasn't to be. We've now, I think, pretty much solidified our top 5 finish in the WSL, barring a crazy string of results next week. Like, I think if we lose 5-0 to Aston Villa and then Liverpool beat Chelsea 5-0, they'll finish 5th. So I don't see that happening. But also a big shout out to the She-Goals guys who have been working tirelessly on their podcast last season and this season, doing amazing work over there. So please, if you want to listen to all things Brighton women's, go over to listen to the She-Goals podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, you can find it in the people may also like thing on our profile. So go over and give them a follow, and have a look at all the wonderful work they're doing.
I'm back if you want my man of the match. You might hear a little thunder in the background, but the siren is stopped. Tom, I like your shout for Hinchelwood. I remember that moment that you're referring to early in the second half where he just sort of pounding his chest and screaming at everyone around him like, we need to wake up. And I thought it really brought us to life again in the second half because we looked a little flat coming out of the break. So I think that's a good shout. I agree. Bart was sensational in moments for sure. And he'd probably be third on my podium, Joe. Second would be Baleba. To me, he just changes the game for us. And if he's not out there, we're probably getting battered in that match. His ability to turn with the ball under pressure and create and, put their defense into a bit of terror when he starts turning forward. It's hard to find players like that. And but for me, man of the match is MINTEH, as you said. I think he rightfully gets it this time, being the goal scorer, but also his effort all over the pitch. I think if we could have done a better job picking out the moments to go long and picking out the moments to play him short where he could get the ball at his feet, I feel like we kind of were in between a number of times and let Byrne come up and close the space because the ball was lofted too much and not far enough ahead. And then when we did go long, we overplayed it. So I feel like if we could have done a better job putting him in position just to have the ball at his feet, he could have done even more damage than he did. So for me, it's YANKUBA MINTEH.
Some strong shouts out there from you both, and I like your podium, Dagan. I'm glad we've got it back. There we go, guys. Thank you for your words on Newcastle. We didn't get as angry about Craig Pawson as I thought we would, but we still gave him what for. But no, thank you very much to everyone who's joined us on the live show, and thank you for tuning in if you're watching this after the fact. Of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Albion Obsessed content if you haven't done so already. We've got a few more games left of this season, which we will, of course, review for you. And we will also be bringing back the Albies. That's the Albion Obsessed end of season awards. Thankfully, there are no myths or curses surrounding the Albies that we have to worry about. So if an Albion player does win one of the coveted Albion awards, we don't have to worry that they'll be off in the summer.
We will be sending the Albion awards to the players, first class Royal Mail, signed for, to go on their mantelpieces. So,
yes, because we know the players are going to, that's going to be up there with, their player of the matches that they get from Premier League games and any medals that they may have from other things like the Egg and Spoon race when they were at primary school. But all that's left to say, guys, is wherever you may be, whenever you may be, we'll see you next time. Take care.